and we have plenty more where that came from. So I hope you're ready. There are some snacks over there and coffee and tea for anyone who needs a little pick-me-up, because our next guest is going to talk about something super interesting. We have Ankit Sharma. He's a software developer from Cisco. And he's going to talk about how to make your Angular apps available in multiple languages, which is pretty cool. So let's give a hand to Ankit. I also asked him what his favorite hobbies were, just to get a little bit of insight into Ankit. And he said coding and cooking. So if you have any questions about Angular or coding or cooking, please grab him after the talk as well. So thanks so much, Ankit.
Okay, hello. I hope I'm audible. So my name is Ankit. I am from India. I currently work at Cisco as a software engineer. And today we are going to talk about how to implement internationalization in Angular. And with the help of internationalization, we are going to make our Angular app available in different languages so that it can be accessible to people from different parts of the world. So I hope this should work. Yeah, got it. Okay, so a little bit about myself. I am a software engineer at Cisco. I am a Google Developer Expert for Angular and a Microsoft MVP for developer technologies. I also blog at ankitsharmablogs.com, so you can go and read about front-end technologies such as Blazor, Angular, and back-end technologies such as .NET. So first of all, let us understand what is internationalization. So internationalization is the process of designing and preparing your project so that it will be accessible in different locales around the world. And a locale is defined as a region where people speak a particular language or a language variant. For example, let's talk about English. The English as it is spoken in US is different from the English which is spoken in India or UK. So that is what the locale is. So the language is English, but the local differ for different reasons. So we are going to implement localization for that. So first of all, internationalization is also termed as I-18N in the shorthand. The reason for that is there are 18 characters between the first character I and the last character N. That's why it is called I-18N. So along with internationalization, there is also a term called localization. So localization is the process of building the versions of your project in different locales. And we first have to apply internationalization on a project, and then we have to localize it. So the internationalization is a one-time work. So if you have a project, you have to internationalize it once. However, you have to localize it for multiple locales every time you want to create a new variant of your application. For example, if you have to create an application for French, German, Dutch, let's say 3 languages are there. So for these 3 different languages, you have to implement localization thrice. However, for internationalization should be implemented only once, which will prepare your application so that it can be available in different languages. And the shorthand for localization is L10N, the same logic. There are 10 characters between the first letter N and the last letter N. So let's talk about how we can implement the same thing in Angular. So in Angular, we have a package called Angular/localize. It is provided by the Angular framework. We need to add it to our Angular application. This will allow us to use the localization features. And once we have implemented this particular package, we can take advantage of this I-18N attribute. As you can see in the example, I have an H1 tag with the text hello world, and I have applied I-18N attribute to it. With this particular attribute, this particular line or this particular tag is available for internationalization. We also have another variant for this I-18N tag where we can provide some description. So how it works in real world is, when you create a application, when you internationalize an application, you generally send the text to a language expert for the translation. And language experts are generally not too much aware about the context in which that particular word has been used. That's why we provide description to those attributes. So this description says this is an introduction header. So this is an optional field. You can provide the description, you can or you cannot provide a description, but it is generally advisable to use it so that it will provide an additional context to your translator and it will help them to translate the text. Now, if you want to initialize any attribute, for example, placeholder in this case, you can use the syntax I18 and X, where X represent represent the attribute you want to translate. For example, here I am translating a placeholder. If you want to translate an alt text, for example, in images we use alt text, so you have to use I18 and alt. So whatever the attribute you want to translate for your HTML, you just have to replace the X in the syntax with that particular attribute name. So we are going to see all of this in a demo at the end of this talk. Now, this is currently I explained you about how to do internationalization in HTML file. However, if we have to do it from the component code, that is a TypeScript file, we can use a global constant that is called localize. Here you can see an example. We are using 2 colons to show the description. So an introduction header is the description, and then after that I have added a text, which is the hello world in this case. So that is how we can use a constant, global constant that is called localize. Once we have implemented or once we have added all the relative I18 and tags, and once we have marked all the text for the translation, we have to extract all those in a translation source file. Now, this is required so that we can get all the translated content in one file, and then we can share the file with a language expert. That particular language expert is going to translate the words. So for that, we have to use this command called extract I18 and. Optionally, we can also provide an output path. For example, here I am saying that it should extract the file into src/translate folder. So whatever the file that is extracted, it will be stored in this particular output path. And after this, a command is run, a message.xlf file will be created. XLF stands for extended language format. And that will this message.xlf file will contain all your text which you have marked for translation previously using I18 and or the localize command. After that is done, we have to localize our application, and for that we have to do 3 changes in angular.json file. First, we have to configure the locale and path of the translated file. For example, if the language is served in French, then from which file we want to serve the content. If the language is served in English, from which file we want to serve the content. All this configuration we have to do. Then we have to define the local configuration for the build. Which, for example, when the application is built either for deployment in a production server, then it needs to extract the information. That's why we have to define the build information. Then we have to specify the build option for each locale so that we can check how the language and file mapping has been done. Finally, if you have to execute them in a local environment, you have to use the configuration flag with the serve, and you have to add the locale. So here in this example, I am saying serve the local host in French language. FR stands for French. There is one important information to note here is that in your local environment, you cannot change the language at runtime. You have to run separately for each local. For example, this code will run only for French. If you want to change manually to English in local environment, it is not possible. However, that is possible only when the code is deployed to any other servers, production servers. And if you have to run it in any other language, let's say English or German, you have to change this value from FR to that particular locale. So we are going to see all of this in an example. And yeah, enough talk. Let's see how we can code. Can you please change this? So we are going to see the things in action, whatever we have talked till now. Oh, I need to HTML. Okay. Please give this to me. Hope this should stay. Awesome, 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 awesome. So here, I will. So here I have a, I hope the font is visible, right? Font is visible? Okay, cool. So I have created a feedback form. So in this example, I am going to create a feedback form and I am going to serve it in two different languages. One is English, one is French. So I am going to show how we have done it. So this is the HTML part, and here you can see that there is a form title, and I have added I18 an attribute over here, and I have provided a description for this. Similarly, for other fields, for example, this is my label. Similarly, I have added an I18 an attribute here for placeholder. So placeholder is name, and I have added I18 and placeholder so that the placeholder can be translated. So that is how I have added the different I18 and attributes to my HTML tags. Similarly, here I have added for gender tag. Then if you go down, here we have a radio button. So for radio button also I have added I18 an attribute. There will be a select box also here. You can see that this is a select, and here I have added it I18 and so that all the options will be marked for translation. So there are 3 options, so all of this will be marked for translation. And there is a TypeScript file. In the TypeScript file, this is a demo form. Once the form is submitted, I will be showing a form submitted successfully message. And to show that, I have used localize to translate it. So you can see that it is saying that message has been, thank you for the valuable feedback, your feedback has been submitted successfully. After this, once I run the command to extract ng extract I18 and this messages.xlf file will be created. Now let us understand this file. First of all, this has a body tag and this has a trans unit tag. Trans unit stands for translation unit. So this defines each text which you want to translate, and it has an ID. This ID is generated by the framework directly, and you should not be changing it. It is automatic generated, and if you change the text, for example, here I am using the text feedback form. If you change it to something else, you should regenerate it, otherwise the ID will not work. Now here you can see there is a source tag. The source says that what is the text you want to translate. So in this case, the English text feedback form. Then it has a context group which contains a list of information. First is source file, from where this text is coming. So it is coming from feedback.component.html, and which line it is coming from. It is coming from line number 5. So if you go over here, check line number 5, you can see the text which is over there. So that is how the mapping is done. You can get the information of all the text in your messages.xlf file. Now if you look at the note section, it also says a description, and what is the description for that? It says feedback form title. So whatever the description we have added here in this I18 and description, the same thing is available in this description over here. So that is how all the trans units are created. So for every I18 and tag, one trans unit section is created. Similarly, for every localized constant, a trans unit is created. I will be showing you that. So here you can see that this is a trans unit for our successful message. So this is the source which says the text. It says the source file, which is our component.ts file, and line number is 14. So if you go to line number 14 here, you can see we have used the localized tag, and that is how that particular text is marked for translation. Now this is called translation source file, which means it contains all the text which you want to translate. Next come the part of localization, where I want to translate into multiple languages. So in this example, I have created a messages.fra.xlf file. You can see in the left side, this is already created. And here, what we have to do is, we have to copy the content from the source file to this target file, direct copy paste, no change. One change which we have to do is, corresponding to every source, we have to add the target text in that particular language. So here, this I have used Google Translate, so translation may not be pretty accurate, but as per Google Translate, the French of feedback form is this particular thing. So how it works is, when I serve my application in French language, then instead of feedback form in English, it will show the text, whatever is in the target section in the French language. That is how I have created a translation file for French. And this is what we have done for each and every trans unit tag. For every source, I have added a corresponding target element. You can see that here, source, target, everything is there. So that is how we have added it. Now, I am already running this in my local. So if I open local host, sorry, this is not the correct local host, 4200. What is the problem? Okay, sorry. Just give me a moment. I need to run this like this. Okay, so here I am running it in French configuration. Let's wait for a moment. It will build. Yeah, it is build is successful. And I need to, why is it not working? I have no idea. Yes, now it is good. Okay, so here you can see that it is already showing in English. However, on the top right, you can see that there is a nav bar which says the language as English. The reason for that is the configuration which I have done is to fetch the language from the URL. This thing will only work in a production environment, as I mentioned, so I will be showing that as well. So in local, I am running it in French. Even if I try to change it to English, it will not work. It will still show in French. So this is a simple form. If I add some value over here, you see the values in drop down is also translated. If I add, if I add some value over here and click on submit, it will show this text, the successfully submitted message, also in French. So that is how we can run this in our local environment. Now, how can we run this in our production environment? So for that, first we have to build this application in our production configuration. So ng build localize, the command which I showed you, and then we have to deploy it. So I have already deployed this application in a Firebase app. So I will be sharing the link at the end of the talk. And here you can see, currently it is in English. You see everything is shown here in English language. This is a deployed application. And on the navigation bar, we have a drop down to change the language. Now, as soon as I click on French, the application will reload. And once it reload, you can see the text has changed to French at the runtime. So whatever the text we have, everything is shown over in French. So that is how we can show this in multiple language. Important thing to note here is the URL. In the URL, you can see that I have added French, FR for French and EN for English. So that is how we have added. Now, I am going to show you the configuration which we have done in the angular.json file. So we have created multiple copies of our messages.xlf file for multiple language. How our application is going to know which file to refer for which local? That configuration is done over here. You can see that I have done the local mapping. For English, I am getting the translation from this particular file. For French, I am getting the translation for this particular file. Similarly, if you have more local, you can keep on adding this over here. So that is how your local and translated file configuration will work. Similarly, if you go down, this is done for the build configuration. So if you run the application in EN mode, we'll set the language to English, otherwise we'll set the language for French, for FR, and finally we have done it for the build configuration. So once you build the application, these commands will run and the application will be built in that particular language. Now, once we run this in our local application, once we run it in our local host, it will not allow you to change the language dynamically. This is a known limitation from the application itself, from the Angular framework itself. You cannot change it in localhost dynamically. However, once you deploy to any server, you can change it dynamically over here, as I have showed you. Now, another thing which I want to show over here is, in the message.xlf file, we also have, okay, so I have showed you about drop down and simple text. However, there are certain scenarios. For example, you have to do the translation of plurals. You have to do the translation for some specific word on a particular language. Then also you have some language which goes from left to right, some goes from right to left. So all those configurations are provided over here. And I will show you how it is doing for mat option. So here you can see, yeah, this is option for gender field. So I have added. Here you can see that it has added the value, which I have added value and the text. So if you go to HTML, in the HTML here, this is the option. The option has a value field and the text which will be shown on the screen, which is like this. All of this are translated over here. You can see this male. Then if you go later, you can see for female also we have. And then at the end, we have the third option, which is others. So that is how you can mark the select option for translation. So that is all about translation. And at the end, before we close the application, can you please change slide? Next slide, please. Okay, I will remove this. Okay, so you can scan this QR code and you can get the GitHub repository for our for the application which we have just built. You can also refer to ankitsharmablogs.com, which is my personal blog. And you can go to this website, Angular.io Guide I-18 and Overview, to learn about internationalization in detail, where you can see how we can cover multiple scenarios, and also we can how we can cover the complex form of internationalization. You can also connect with me on social media. Thank you for joining. I closed a bit early.
Hello. Amazing. Thank you so much. No, perfect. That was great. Before you go, actually, does anyone have any questions for Ankit? Any questions in the crowd? There's one question over there. Yes. Do you want to come up? Mic is yours.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. My question was, if you build the app and run it on an HTTP server locally, can you simulate the en/en/fr and have it? Oh, okay. So did you get my question?
Yeah, I get your question. Yeah, is it working? Yeah. Okay, so if you run it on any server, whether run on HTTP host local, that is totally fine. Your runtime configuration will work. The only limitation is when you run ng-serve command, it will not work, because that is a local server.
Yeah.
So any server you have you deploy it on Firebase or your personal server, that is totally fine.
Perfect.
So
thank you.
The only thing is that when you deploy it on a server, you use the command ng build prod, right? So that configuration itself will help you to change it in runtime. So that is the key point over here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody has anything else to
Amazing.
ask?
Any other questions?
8 minutes now.
Do I see any hands? Or was the presentation clear enough for everyone?
Okay, I think we are good. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you did a good job. Thank you so
you.
much, Ankit.